So I guess I'll just kind of give a preface of the statement. We're here today to talk with Tim about the incident that occurred, and just to give, in his own words, an account of what took place, and let the viewers kind of decide for themselves if justice was served here or not. And so I'm just going to let you kind of take it from there.
Yes, my name is Timothy S. Searcy, Sr. I'm a Douglasville resident, and I am here today to tell my story about what occurred in Baldwin County in August of 2010. It was about, the party started around 7 or 8 p.m. and the fight actually occurred on August the 8th at 1 a.m. outside of the house. My wife, Jamie Rice Searcy, and I attended a 40th birthday party at the home of her sister, Dawn Rice Gray, whose party it was being thrown for. It was thrown for Dawn Rice Gray and her husband, Anthony Gray. We arrived at the party a little after 8 p.m. With some mutual friends of the Grays and us, Andrew Power, Stephen Griggs, and a Jennifer Pittman. We celebrated well into the evening. The evening was going really well. There was some drinking, a lot of food, and a lot of laughter going on. And maybe about 11:30 that evening, somewhere close to midnight, my friend Stephen Griggs informed me that another mutual friend of Veronica Belden was arriving at the party. He had asked Dawn Gray for her permission and directions and her address so that Veronica can come to the party. Shortly after this person, Veronica Belden, arrived, her and Dawn Gray got into a verbal argument. This argument lasted for about a good 15 minutes. It went outside there. Stephen Griggs, Veronica Belden, and Dawn Gray and Anthony Gray proceeded outside of the home from the back to the front of the house, where it was my interpretation that Veronica was leaving. Shortly after that, Dawn Gray and Anthony Gray returned back to the scene of the party, which was in the basement, and they started, trying to smooth things over with the guests because of the situation. Guests were deciding they would leave. The tension was getting high. And I started to feel bad for the Grays because it was an embarrassing situation.
What was the cause of the situation initially? What was the issue that was embarrassing?
The issue that made it embarrassing was that people were leaving because of the tension in there. The Grays had a history of, during their parties, sometimes people would get in arguments, sometimes fights would break out. And this was probably the second or third incident that I myself had witnessed while attending the Grays, where a fight had broken out. And like I said earlier, because of the tension in there and because of the embarrassment to the Grays, I kind of sort of didn't want to witness their embarrassment, so I left the area and went into a bathroom. I stayed in the bathroom for a good 3 to 5 minutes, pretending to use it, and when I came out of the bathroom, everyone was gone from the immediate area, which was in the basement. If I recall, there may have been one, maybe two people in the kitchen area cleaning up, but all the other guests were gone. I checked outside of the basement area in the backyard, and I didn't see anyone. Went back inside of the basement area and up the steps, which opened into the kitchen area of the home, and there I didn't see anyone there either. Just off from the kitchen is an upper deck from the bottom area outside of the basement. I went outside of that area to see if anyone was out there, and there was no one there. There are two sets of steps on this deck off from the kitchen, one that leads down to the backyard and one that leads off the corner of the house, a little short step that goes around the side of the house and up to the front. I went down the shorter steps toward the side of the house, and there I started hearing voices from the front moving back toward the house as if they were coming inside. Instead of going around to the front of the house, I came back in the way I went out. Upon entering the kitchen area and looking off into the living room area, I saw Jennifer Pittman, the friend of Jamie's, and I saw Jamie, my wife, and they had looks on their face as if they had witnessed a horrific incident, maybe seen a ghost, seen a house burned down, but they were visually just surprised and shocked. About that time when I noticed this, Dawn Gray, Jamie's sister, came from behind both of them, and she started yelling at Jamie. She started yelling at me, accusing us of bringing people to her birthday party, and they ruined it. And Jamie looked at her sister and said, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't invite these people to the party, which was true. I was the one who invited Stephen and Andrew Bauer to the party. At that point, Dawn, without saying a word, she said, your silence is enough. I'm sorry, she did say something. She said, your silence is enough. She reached out, grabbed Jamie by her hair, and started to rip it out of her head. I reached in to try to separate them, and at that point, Jamie's sister Dawn ran back, and with an open hand, she slapped Jamie in the face. At that point, I was able to separate them, and I ushered Jamie back down the steps that I had came up from the basement area, back down to the basement. When we got down there, followed by Jennifer Pittman, we encountered Jamie's brother-in-law, her sister's husband, who had he looked disgusted, he looked angry, and he asked, what's going on? And I said that your wife just hit my wife. And he started berating Jamie, his sister-in-law, accusing her of taking his home for granted. He started calling her all kind of names, derogatory names. And I looked at her and I said, it's definitely time we leave. Because we had come with the intention of spending the night, we had overnight bags packed and things that we had brought to celebrate her sister's birthday. I told her to gather those things so that we can leave. And right about the time that I said that, I heard a conversation between Anthony, her brother-in-law, and Jennifer Pittman. And then suddenly he had Jennifer Pittman by the throat, pinned up against a wall. I walked over and put myself between him and Jennifer, and I looked at him and I said, man, you shouldn't be putting your hands on a woman. He turned and looked at me, and with this most sinister look in his eyes, he said, get your black ass out of my house. I will drop your black ass right here in my house. I will kill you. And I stepped back with my hands open, in open hand of submission, and I looked at the women. I said, it's definitely time to go. And I said, get the things, let's go. And I started backing away from him and backing toward the exit that led out of the basement. At that point, my wife, Jamie, and Jennifer, they had gathered all of our things, and they made it outside of the door, and I ran out behind them, just in fear of what this man was going to do. We made it out the backyard, up the side of the house, and up to our vehicle, followed by Anthony, and eventually followed by Dawn, Jamie's sister. We got to the passenger side of our car, and I opened up the trunk, and Grays, Anthony and Dawn, and another friend were standing on the passenger side, yelling at us, cussing us out, telling Jamie she'll never see her nieces and nephews again. Her sister called her worthless, said she wasn't worth anything. We opened up the trunk of the car. Like I said, we put our belongings in the trunk of the car. Since they were on the passenger side of the car, yelling and screaming and obviously wanting to do us harm, I went around to the driver's side of the car, opened up the door, and I instructed Jamie to enter the car from that side, which she did. I checked to make sure Jennifer was in her car, which was directly behind us. We got in our vehicles, we started, and we drove away. The position that we were parked in was on the opposite side of the road next to the Gray's house, and we had to drive down the road to a cul-de-sac, turn around, and come back out, driving past the Gray's house to exit the neighborhood. When we got to the cul-de-sac and started our turn, Jamie told me about an earlier fight, just minutes before the situation occurred between her and her sister and her and her brother-in-law and me. And she said during this earlier incident, Anthony Gray had punched my friend Andrew Power in the eye. He also shoved my wife, Jamie, to the ground via her throat. And, I just want to point out that my friend Andrew Power is a sheriff's deputy for Douglas County, which Anthony knew about that. They left, and my wife and Jennifer came back inside to get me so that we can leave. Upon hearing this situation, I decided that we still needed to leave. Everyone was gone. We could handle the matter when we're doesn't have any alcohol in our systems, get the authorities involved and whatnot. As we were pulling past the Gray's house, their neighbor, one Jerry Hopkins, stood out in front of my car in the road with his hands up, motioning for me to stop. I did, and I rolled down the passenger side window where Jamie was sitting at. He came to the window and he said, "You all have been partying, you've been drinking, we've all been drinking. Why don't you guys stay at our house tonight, and then you can leave in the morning rather than drive out and get a DUI." And before I can even answer him and accept his offer, Anthony came from behind him, shoved him away, stuck his head and hand inside of the window of the car in front of Jamie, and started threatening her again, telling us we needed to leave his neighborhood. He told us to leave, and I told him to get away from my wife. I told him, "Please get away from my car." He refused. He acted as if I wasn't even there. So I put the car in park, and I opened up my door, and by the time I got out of my car, he came around to my side. He struck me twice, once on the right side of my head. My body turned this way, my hand went up, and when my hand went up and he swung with his right hand, it hit my arm right here on my upper arm, just about below my shoulder. I had a nice bruise there. That impact spent me around. It was so hard, it spent me around to the ground. I had bruises and blisters on my hand where I stopped myself. I fell in front of my car at the corner on the driver's side. I stood up as quickly as I can, fearing that Anthony would come and kick me, punch me, knock me out, or do anything. And when I stood up, he was about to strike me again. I started swinging back, and we started swinging at each other. I was hitting him, he was hitting me. Eventually, he fell backwards, and I fell forwards on top of him, and I was still swinging. At some point, I heard my wife yell to me, "Y'all stop." And I stood up. Mr. Gray was laying on the pavement. He had some bruising and some cuts about his face. And I looked at my wife and I said, "Let's go." She got in the car and we drove away. About a minute after we left the scene, my wife looked at me and she said, "The authorities are going to be called." And she said, "We haven't done anything wrong. Let's go back." And I said, "You're right." I turned the vehicle around. We went back to the scene and we parked a little bit up the road from where everything had occurred. I got out of the vehicle and I called 911. During the 911 conversation, you can tell I was angry. I was cussing, and I told the operator that, this person had put his hands on my wife. I told the operator that I had, beat the crap out of him, and that he was lying in the street and he needed an ambulance. And the 911 operator told me that there will be help on the way. The sheriff's department arrived, and they took over the scene. I went to the hospital because during the initial punches, I cut my hand on his glasses, and I received several stitches. The cut went very deep in my hand. Mr. Gray went to the hospital. He received some bruising and some injuries to his face and to his mouth. No one ever came to the hospital to see me. No one ever came to talk to me. I was released from the hospital and I went home. My wife, however, and her friend Jennifer remained at the scene. before coming to pick me up at the hospital, where they spoke to an investigator for Paulding County Sheriff Department. The investigator gave her some information and instructed her to have him call, to contact him, so that I can come in and speak with him about what happened. I did. I went in and spoke with Investigator Nordman, and he took my statement. I wrote down a statement as well as videotape my statement. And I thought that was the end of it. This happened in August of 2010. In February of 2011, while working, I received a phone call from Investigator Nordman. His words were, "I have 7 warrants, and one of them are for you." I asked him why. He said it's because of the incident on the night of August 8th, 2010. I asked him if the other person, Anthony Gray, was arrested. He said yes, he was being arrested, as well as Veronica Belden. He told me I had about 2 days to turn myself in voluntarily and to be processed in, and then I can be bailed out. So after speaking with some friends of mine who deal with legal issues, I went ahead and turned myself in. I stayed in jail for about 6 hours, where then I was released and I went home. About a month later, I received a summons to appear in court for an arraignment. And when I did, I went in. I pled not guilty to 3 charges. One charge was aggravated battery, which is a felony for fracturing the orbital bone of Mr. Gray. The other charge was aggravated battery, also a felony, for fracturing 5 teeth in Anthony Gray's mouth on his left side. And the other charge was aggravated assault for punching Mr. Gray in the face several times. I pled not guilty to all 3 charges, and I was released until my court date. This was in...
Can I stop you for a second?
Okay,
I want to
I'm
ask
sorry.
you a question. No, you're doing great.
Okay.
But what made it an aggravated situation? What was the, because there's simple battery and then there's aggravated. What was the aggravating circumstance?
The aggravated was that they felt it was a malicious intent to do Mr. Gray bodily harm. They felt like I went far beyond a controlled situation with the intention of deforming Mr. Gray or rendering him body parts useless, and that's why they call it aggravated.
Mm-hmm. How many times did you hit Mr. Gray?
I don't recall. I know that while we were both standing, I think I threw maybe 4 to 5 punches, and while we were on the ground, I think it was no more than about 2 or 3 punches. Mr. Gray, when he fell backwards, he let out a moan or a sigh, so to speak, as if someone had, made an impact on the ground. And then he started the motions of getting back up. I do remember that, when I did come down to continue to defend myself, he did let out a sigh. I do remember that.
So was he trying to get back up and you hit him to keep him from getting back up? Or what was the situation?
I don't know if he was actually trying to get back up. All I know is that, a human being that my size or bigger had attacked me and my wife. And I wanted to make sure that he was not going to come after me anymore. So I continued to swing. I believe a doctor called it fight or flight. It's an adrenaline rush. That's where you continue to fight until you know that the danger is no longer there, or the threat is no longer there. And that's why.
Did he acknowledge hitting you first?
No. He denied hitting me first. He denied striking my wife. He denied striking Andrew Power. He denied putting his hands on Jennifer Pittman. The charges, he was charged with assault on Andrew Power, my wife, and Jennifer Pittman.
But not you?
But not me. He was never charged with striking me.
So you all fought each other?
Yes.
You had bruises from him?
Yes.
Did you show the bruise on your arm to the investigator? Did
Yes.
you see that?
He took photographs, and those photographs were presented in court.
But he was not charged for hitting you.
No,
Only the other two.
only the other three. My
Three.
wife, Jennifer, and Andrew Power.
Okay. So, kind of pick up where you were after the investigator gave you the warrant, said you need to present yourself.
After I presented myself and I was released and I went to court for my arraignment, I pled not guilty to all of my charges, and then I went and sought a lawyer. I found a lawyer, and we, talked about everything that had happened. He told me that it was a very defendable case. He looked at everything involved, and he said it clearly looked like self-defense.
Were you offered a plea agreement?
We asked for a plea. We made every effort. My arraignment was in March of 2011. The case went to trial in October of 2011. Between March and October, each time we would go to court, we would make offers, to pleas. I made an offer to plead to just battery or a public affray, and I would offer to pay full restitution. I offered to plead to public affray, which is a misdemeanor, and to pay full restitution to Mr. Gray for his injuries. And that was denied. And we made several requests at the district attorney's office to plead to lesser offenses, to get the case, not go to trial, because it was a waste of taxpayers' money.
Who was the district attorney?
Well, the prosecuting attorney was Brett Williams. The district attorney, I can't remember his name, but he was also working with my memory just went blank. All I remember is that the prosecuting attorney was Brett Williams.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And like I said, we made several offers to plead to lesser offenses with full restitution, and they denied it. We eventually went to trial. We had jury selections on Monday, October the 17th. They brought in 36 potential jurors, and out of 36 potential jurors, there were only 2 black individuals and 1 Hispanic individual. And once the jury selection was made, out of 12 jurors and 1 alternate, there was 1 black male and 1 Hispanic male on the jury. The trial lasted for a week. The prosecution used the 17th, the 18th, and part of the 19th with their witnesses. And then on the 19th, my defense attorney presented his side. On that Thursday, the 20th, the jury was given the case so that they can look at it and make their decision. They couldn't reach a decision by the end of the 20th, so we had to come back in on Friday the 21st, where the jury found me guilty on 1 charge of aggravated battery for the fractures to Mr. Gray's teeth, and the aggravated assault for striking Mr. Gray about the head. The other charge, aggravated battery, the injuries to his orbital bone were dropped. I was acquitted of that. The judge offered to do sentencing on the 21st, October 21st, and my lawyer asked that that date be changed until November the 1st, so that we can reach character witnesses and things of that. Immediately, I was, in a spectacular moment, I was placed in handcuffs and escorted out of the courtroom to go to jail. And I sat in Paulding County Jail until November the 1st, where I was brought in front of 23 of my closest friends and family. One of the jurors, Jim Waddell Jr., contacted my wife. He requested her as a friend. My wife didn't accept his friendship, but she, inquired as to his, reasoning for contacting her. He he stated that he was a juror in my trial, and he asked what my sentencing was. My wife told him, what my sentence was, 18 months, and she asked him why was he inquiring about my sentencing, and he said that he did not feel that I was guilty of anything. He did not feel I was wrong with doing anything. He said that he thought I was a really nice guy. My wife asked him why did any other jurors find me guilty, and he said that none of the other jurors would budge, and he just didn't want to be in opposition, so he just agreed with what everybody else was doing. He also stated that my wife was very pretty. I took this information and I made hard copies, and I presented it to my lawyer. My lawyer told me to hold on to the information and that he would file a motion for a retrial. He also told me that I needed to contact a public defender in order to file my appeal for a retrial. On December the 13th, 2010, we went back to court for a restitution hearing. During this restitution hearing...
It was 2011?
I'm sorry, 2011. I apologize. It was December 13th, 2011. During this restitution hearing, the judge ordered that I pay over $16,000 in restitution to Mr. Gray, to the dental office, to the hospital, the emergency room, to the ambulance services, and to the insurance companies that covered his injuries. At the end of this restitution hearing, my lawyer asked the judge if he would consider reducing my sentence, the time of my sentence, and the judge stated that he felt like my sentence was not harsh and that it was well deserved. He felt like I lost control of myself and that I went too far. And so we left the courtroom with that. I since then have filed an appeal through the Paulding County Public Defender's Office with a Mr. Bullard. Mr. Bullard told me that he's by himself, and he has a handful of people ahead of me, and that he asked me to be patient. On Monday of last week, I received a phone call where I've been instructed to turn myself in today, to be exact, January the 16th. Tonight I have to turn myself in by 7 p.m. To start my 18-month sentence in a probation detention center. I called Mr. Bullard on the day that I received a phone call to tell him about the instructions, and he apologized to me, and he asked me to be patient, and that he hasn't gotten my transcripts from the clerk's office yet, and he hasn't had a chance to even look at my case.
So the appeal really hasn't been submitted yet. It's just kind of sitting on his desk waiting for him to do something with it?
Correct. The appeal hasn't officially been submitted. I've gone through the motions of requesting an appeal, but the appeal has not been submitted yet.
Mm-hmm. And he said be patient?
He asked me to be patient, yes.
Mm-hmm. I think that says it all. So I appreciate you telling your story, and I hope that someone will take an interest in this to help you out of this situation. Is there anything that you'd like to add to the story for the viewers?
I've never been the type of person who feels like I'm always being done an injustice because of the color of my skin. My wife is white. Her brother-in-law, whom I was in an altercation with, he's white. The jury, however, was completely just unbalanced, and I feel like that was definitely injustice, racial undertone, so to speak, in this situation. And I feel like the decision to find me guilty was made the day the trial began. During the at the end of the trial, after I was convicted and I served 10 days in Paulding County Jail, I had to go back on November 1st for sentencing. I received a 15-year sentence in jail. However, the judge told me that I'd serve 18 months in a probation detention center. He gave me, I believe it was 7 years of probation after that, in which if anything happens, I could go back and finish out my 15-year sentence.